Since we are all assembled, Vice Chair Abrams, would you like to call us to order?
Sure. So, hold on, sorry. Let me organize my windows here. Okay. Hi, welcome to the Tuesday, November 28th meeting of the Ordinance Revisions Committee of the Planning Commission for the City of Ann Arbor. We will begin with an opportunity for public comment. So persons may speak for up to 3 minutes. And please state your name and address for the record. And I see one hand raised. Yeah, so we'll open public comment.
Claudius Vincenz, you have permission to address the commission. The Ordinance Revisions Committee.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear
You
you.
are. Okay. So my name is Claudius Vincenz. I'm living on 545 South 5th Avenue. And what this is about is just a second here. It's about the 228 packet PUD. So this is the block size skyscraper that's proposed with 1,500 beds. The developer is Subtext, and it's proposed to be built between South 4th and South 5th Avenue, south of Packard. So 1,500 beds in that one single block. And so we are concerned that the approval process is being fast-tracked and that not enough time is given to concerned citizens like myself and our neighbors to evaluate specific studies like traffic, flood, shade, and many more that the developer promised during the public input meeting that they would be forthcoming, but they are still not available. But the design review board is already meeting on December 13 to discuss this. So so how can the design review board provide an informed opinion without having enough time to study the complex studies and issues that arise by such a big project that affects many people, not just the neighbors? And the same is true for you, the Planning Commission. And I would like to make sure that you are scheduling the meeting for this project so that you and everybody else who is impacted by this zoning violation has sufficient time to vet these studies, which, as I repeat, are currently not available. And so me and our neighbors, we have reason to be concerned about that the city is just rubber stamping this project. So, and the reason for that is, for example, the traffic patterns on our block has already been changed to without any public input or notice to accommodate the developer's wishes. This before any permit has been given or anybody has reviewed this publicly. But the city council members have been meeting with the developers for months. This is all the makings of the decision that is made in secret, and public meetings like this one are just for show. There is no sign that the input from many people in the public has been taken into account. I can only refer to the meeting, the public input meeting.
I'm sorry, your time has elapsed. And
so I urge you to change that and make sure that everybody's interests are considered independently of the.
Thank you for your comments. We have another hand raised. Our second hand raised is Tom Stolberg. You have permission to address the Ordinance Revisions Committee for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, this is Tom Stolberg calling from 1202 Traver in Ann Arbor. I like what you're doing tonight in terms of an ordinance revision committee review of the UDC. How can we streamline our rules? And in light of the comprehensive plan revision going on, well, what's the follow on from that in terms of translating that into the UDC? Very important timing on that. So I'd like to remind people, because I know planning commissioners and city council people are not trained well in planning and zoning. Experts in this area have commented on that for the past several years. Now would be a great opportunity for planning commissioners and city council people to receive better training than what you've been getting. It's a disservice to you all to not have that training to be able to do your job to the best of your capability. I'll remind people that the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act allows our city to have a zoning law if it's based on a plan, the comprehensive plan, and that the zoning code itself is essentially a codification of the comprehensive plan into legally enforceable language. So we need to have that plan in place first, and then have the language in the zoning law essentially just spell out in legalese what the plan is telling us. And we haven't always done that. Actually, we've done that too many times, a bit out of order, and gone with zoning prior to having the plan revised. And I remind you that the plan can be revised not for the whole city, but for an area. But we're about to embark on a citywide comprehensive plan review, so it's a perfect time for everybody to understand what the rules are and how to apply those rules as we evaluate the UDC. I will point out some notable problems in the past. Lower Town was illegal. Recently, the Southtown approval was illegal. Lower Town cost us 93 units of affordable housing. Southtown's costing us 33 units of affordable housing. Southtown is opening us up, exposing the city to significant legal potential jeopardy. And I believe that this happened primarily because city council members and planning commissioners are not trained well enough and don't understand the ramifications of things like conditional zoning, which are complex and can be quite counterintuitive. I've gone into detail on that when I've spoken about those two projects. I hope we can all learn how to do our jobs better. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. There are no further hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to our agenda. The first item on our agenda is unzoning, zoning minimalism and simplification. And I think we have a presentation from planning staff.
There is, and I will begin. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to rename myself for our guests from the public. My name is Hank Kelly. I use they, them pronouns. I am the Deputy Planning Manager, and I'm joined this evening by Planner Alexis DeLeo, who uses she, her pronouns. I'm going to just show really quickly some of the documents that are included in tonight's packet. We had a little bit of a hiccup with our legislative software and had to do some troubleshooting with the clerk's office. So you may not have, you will not have seen this very far in advance, but in tonight's agenda, if you see the attachments, if you had downloaded a previous version of the agenda, you may have to go look at the updated document, but there is a memorandum from staff, and we were very happy to have some support by Jonathan Artson, our urban planning intern, who was not able to join us this evening, but did a significant amount of legwork, which we appreciate, putting together materials to frame how we can think about this term that is, I believe it is in the work program as unzoning, but we're going to try to dive further into that this evening. So just to draw your attention to this memo that has a little more content in it than what we have necessarily summarized in our presentation this evening, but I'm going to share that presentation. Give me one moment to go full screen. Is everyone able to see a screen that says unzoning, zoning minimalism and simplification? Great. So we're hoping to kind of go sort of quickly through some of the framing and focus tonight on discussion and also shared definitions. But the introduction to this item is that we want to discuss with you what you mean by unzoning, what the intention was behind putting that into the work program. I'm sure that that predated my time in the department, and to also pull forward some concepts that we think could be related to why it was added to the work program, and see if those have anything for learning for Ann Arbor. So in terms of purpose and definitions, tonight's discussion and in general for this topic, we would like to define what commissioners envisioned in adding this to the work program to set context around a shared definition, and maybe not most importantly, but most concretely, to define the directions for you to contribute to this zoning simplification, so that we can get out of we want to set the context in the realm of ideas, but we need to zero in on the purpose of the Ordinance Revisions Committee, which is to lean on your thoughts and expertise to actually refine and change areas of code. And so our first open discussion point is with this slide, to invite you to all share what definition you envisioned when this was added to the work program, and as a prompt, because I think that it may be in my mind and in discussions with other staff, we think that what was meant was something close to this description of zoning minimalism, which came from a recent 2021 report by Norman Wright that was available through the American Planning Association, that said zoning minimalism seeks to develop quality zoning rules with clear goals, speed up approval processes, lessen administrative burdens, and set equitable and expose inequitable rules. So I will turn the mic over to our committee members to discuss and help us to work toward a shared definition as the first task of our meeting tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Is there anybody who would like to kick off discussion? Yeah, Commissioner Mills.
I recall the idea of unzoning among planning commission originating, I don't remember how many years ago, but I remember Mr. Leonard bringing it up in the context of, when I thought it was brought up, some of it was maybe stray provisions, one-off kind of provisions, perhaps as we were talking about site plan light and streamlining permitting processes. I think I have in my mind, I'll be honest, I've come to associate it also with collapsing some zoning districts that it could be collapsing zoning districts that are duplicative. I don't know that it has, until doing reading, I don't know that it has entirely meant like moving more away from uses and more towards form. But I think in my, like, unzoning in my mind has taken that on a little bit more, but that's when I've talked about it, or when I've thought about it, that's what's appealing to me. Is I think I remember, but you guys were around then too. Like all of us have been here for a while, like thinking about how do we take 300 pages and potentially making it significantly fewer and easier to understand and better.
All right,
And-
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, well, and I was just thinking in our recent discussion about downtown premiums and the elegant solution being like the cutting, like the simplification, like I think that that's a great recent example in my mind of what unzoning could be is,
Yeah, Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
So I have the same recollection. I can't remember how Brett defined it, but I'm pretty sure he brought it to us. And I think more recently, when I've been thinking about it, I have been thinking about it in the context of the minimalism. Similar to what Commissioner Mills said, just how do we take this very complex and long document that I think has done a really good job of getting us organized, but streamline it? Like, do we really need like however many R districts and C districts? And like, how can we make it like even more palatable and more simple for people and us to understand? So I don't remember what he meant by zoning or by unzoning initially, but that's how I've been thinking about it.
I'll summarize here when we hear all voices and make sure I've understood the main themes.
I think for me, it's always also tied to issues of equity. And an understanding that there are certain ways in which zoning encourages development, inequitable forms of development or types of development in our community that we want to no longer incentivize or or limits certain kinds of development that we want to incentivize. So I think there's something also about thinking through zoning from an equity lens. I would second the ideas about kind of streamlining and simplification, and maybe tied to equity and understanding that overcomplication and convoluted processes and incomprehensible zoning, inhibits, I think, access to development for small scale developers or people maybe who aren't familiar with the process in the community. So it's also just about making things more friendly.
I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, a little bit of it was tied to the site plan light, but it was not just like duplicative, like residential districts, but maybe duplicative things like, if we have a lot minimum and we have setbacks, do both things actually give us the form, or is it like doubling down? Or like, what is it in our zoning code? Like, I think I've been talking about more recently, like occupant per dwelling unit. If our building code takes care of these things, should they be in our zoning code? So there's some like, where's redundancy or doubling down? And I think part of the site plan like conversation was also by talking about projects we don't see, right? So recently we had a conversation about why do we review projects? And it's to see the outcomes of our ordinances and if it's actually the outcomes we want or don't want. But the one thing we don't really see is the death by 1,000 cuts of development we don't see. And so trying to read between the lines of how many ordinances combined together restrict creative solutions or any solutions at all that can be realized. And so I think that's been a question, like not just in terms of process, which would be a site plan light, but is it something like a turning radius that just makes a certain site infeasible, technically infeasible to do something, and things like that. So I think it kind of starts with either dedicating like staff time or an audit to early conversations and understanding where projects die. And if we can start to pinpoint what ordinances are doing that. And seeing if like they're dying for good reason or not. So just to kind of add that to the mix.
Okay, thank you. I heard several times zone collapse. That seems to be a common theme. We can talk about some of this in more depth in a minute. Also just how to take something really long, make it shorter. So maybe that even gets into the realm of ensuring plain language writing, or I also heard about duplicative sections. Yeah, that's and that it was tied, at least at the idea level initially, to site plan light. That is a separate item in your work program. So as much as we can disentangle, I would like to.
I'll just add, Hank, if it helps, I think it just kind of spurred the brainstorming for the subsequent piece, that both have an intent of helping more equitable and available development to happen, but through different tactics. So not that they might have to be together. I see Sarah nodding, but hopefully that clarifies. I don't think the expectation was that they had to be married.
It was more the review of like, we did a lot of interviews, and I think that this was before your time. And I really mean staff, but I think some ORC and Planning Commission members listened in with developers to understand what the pain points were. And one of the things that we heard again and again is just I like the thought, like the death by 1,000 cuts, like all of the little things that add up to make projects either infeasible on a particular site or just extremely expensive. And so site plan light was one path, expedited, knocking down kind of what goes through what review, but this is another idea that arose from that. And so it's really affordability and accessibility and having for smaller projects. And I think was one of this is what it's linked to.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. I think we have another moment for discussion later. I'm not sure, based on what I just heard, if all of these concepts will relate back to the goals and the ideas of the intention for zoning simplification, but we'll see. And if they're irrelevant, then you can let us know. But if they're helpful or interesting, then we can delve into them and can continue our research into these areas. So just looking through literature, whether it was pink zoning, simplified planning zone, zoning minimalism, there's a lot of cross-referencing to other initiatives or terms. One of those terms that Jonathan and I came across is simplified planning zones. This is a term that's used, it appears mostly in Commonwealth countries and Ireland, UK, it was in Canada. We saw some examples. And the idea is to kind of remove some of the entitlement work to encourage development and investment. This could be development and investment specifically in housing, and in some cases it was. Some of the definitions of these zones are listed on this slide. One that I would highlight is from Toronto that seemed to resonate and sort of overlap with the zoning minimalism idea, which was to propose changes that reduce confusion, remove redundant provisions, and simplify wording where appropriate. Potential changes include updating, clarifying zoning regulations, for example, to eliminate confusion and duplication regarding secondary suites and multiplexes. There's some more specific case studies for the simplified planning zones in your memo if you're interested. Pink zoning was another topic that had been shared. This is something that seems to be tied in with some of the kind of Congress for New Urbanism crowd, and also this project for lean urbanism is had a briefing on pink zoning as a concept. This was also embraced by a former planning director in Detroit, and the next slides talk about what they did there. But the idea of the pink zone is pretty simple. It's just to, instead of tackling a overhaul of your zoning code, which may be difficult, it may be costly, may be politically infeasible, it may have other barriers, to take a specific geographic area and use it as a test case to streamline things. And they're using specifically lean practices, which I believe come from the manufacturing world, but it's basically to improve efficiency, cut waste, and remove remove barriers. But to use these geographic areas to try to remove impediments to economic development and development generally, which again can include goal-oriented development like housing specifically, carefully defined locations that can contain viable mixes of homes and businesses, so places where you can see a result. The small size allows you to concentrate resources, focus public-private initiatives, energy, and money. Also, it gives kind of a place for the public to see specific change from government intervention. And how that was applied recently in our neighbor city of Detroit was actually, Alexis, I think I was going to ask you to step in and talk a little bit in case there are any questions about overlay zoning, because some of the overlay zoning in Ann Arbor does work a little differently. But what they did was they said, okay, we would like to concentrate easing regulations specifically for areas that can that coincide with our traditional Main Street overlay areas. And they used it to do things like increase access to outdoor dining, to eliminate some of the additional permitting and approvals or exceptions that would be required to that, which is, later became very helpful during COVID. Then also reducing parking requirements, which is, not an issue in Ann Arbor, but because we have eliminated them. But you could see how it could be applied to other areas of code or regulation. That was what I had to discuss in terms of any materials and concepts, but unless there's specific questions on those, we can dive into these discussion questions, which will build off of what we were just talking about with having a shared definition. There's just 2 slides here, and we're open to other questions, but I am going to turn it over now to Alexis, unless someone wants me to pause so we can talk about simplified planning zones, pink zones, or mixtape zoning. Then we can dive into these discussion questions.
All right, yeah. So as usual, these are just prompts. Free-flowing conversation is perfectly fine, but trying to link and tie the broad concept of on-zoning or minimalist or streamlining to the UDC document and how to carry it and how to start, how to approach it. The UDC provides both review and approval procedures. That's a section. And it also provides the use and development standards. And it's over 300 pages long to do that. So what does simplification exactly mean to the UDC? I will say, I think we've kind of covered this a bit. We've touched on this for sure a few minutes ago. But like what specific article or section could benefit from minimalism? Are we even prepared to like drill that deep right now? But these are the kind of questions that we'll need to address in order to carry this out. And then finally, again, for discussion prompt, but would it be enough to do one thing? Do a thorough copy editing for brevity, by reducing the number of sentences, increasing lists, tables, graphics, pictures worth 1,000 words. There are 1,000 words or more in there. And just generally cutting the content without changing the requirements. Would that be enough, or do we need to also attack the actual standards, lessening them, eliminating them, just eliminating steps in the process? And these are provided for you tonight as discussion prompts.
Thank you. Does anybody want to chime in or have a question?
I can jump in.
Okay,
for maybe working from the bottom. I would say my answer is no. But I think that's a little more obvious, like from the earlier conversation, like it has to be actual ordinance changes, not just organization. Specific articles, like some of the use stuff, I guess I do want to do a full audit and ask, like, what was the intent behind this and what is the outcome of everything? There's things like indoor recreation as a use. I know some of these things that's like, if we don't have it in there, it's not allowed, but like, how could we think of a category that captures some of these really specific things in a bundle? Because I'm trying to think of in what scenario do we have a problem with indoor recreation? I feel like there's not an area in town that rock climbing would be bad, but just as an example, right? So that sort of example of question 2, what articles or sections, looking at use, understand the intent, and understanding if we can describe those categories in more simplified form. I think the FAR versus height is a good one. Like FAR is really hard, I think, generally for community to understand. So the more we can find plain language and plain understanding for the community to know what to expect in their backyard, I think the clearer and more productive conversations we can have as a community. So that might be like a language audit. And yeah, minimum lot size, I definitely want to talk about, and occupants and dwelling units. So I think those are really critical relative to local development and housing. But I think what we heard when we said death by 1,000 cuts was like, once you go to the 4th floor, you're SOL. Like it's kind of like outside of this. And we talked about this sometimes, it's like fire trucks and garbage and turning radiuses. They're referred to here, but they're engineering codes. But I think having a better understanding of some of those things, right? We just saw the garbage variants or whatever, like of the hotel, because it's hard to manage big garbage. And we have one solution in our city, which is big garbage. We don't have municipal garbage, like block by block sort of thing. So it's like just kind of understanding some of those variables, be like, what do we have control over? And maybe what do we need to figure out how to advocate for if we can't actually do the work? Sorry, that was really long. But I think it's articles 3 and 4 more than it is 5. I think 5 is article 5 is site plan light. Maybe that's the last thing I'll say.
thank you. Commissioner Mills or Commissioner Hammerschmidt? Yeah, Commissioner Mills.
I will agree. When I was thinking about the list of like, what's the quick thing, FAR versus height, I 100% agree with Commissioner Sauvé. That is the clear one, that the intent is the same-ish. One is way easier to explain and for community members to like resonate with. One of the things in perusing some of the pre-reading that struck me and opportunities here, I think, were we regulate for maximum lot area coverage, but I appreciated in the minimalist approach actually regulating for minimum lot area coverage and having it be a large number, because this is the idea, like it accomplishes a couple of things and makes it easier to understand. So the discussion in that zoning minimalism about like what this does is it means that you can't have a whole bunch of surface parking. And so I don't know what the thing is that's I'll just say that that's one of the things that stood out to me as a single provision that may have multiple benefits. I think this was apparent, and actually I'm really glad, Ms. Leo, that you're here, because in going through UDC, creating of the UDC, all of the like one-off little footnotes that were for a specific zone, like, and carve outs. I mean, like tracking those down and not getting them lost was amazing work, but also made me think, like, why, like, are there some of those things that can make it a whole lot easier to read and understand what's going on without without fundamentally changing the meaning and actually making for better, more streamlined overall. So that's tier number 2. And maybe this is on the next slide, but I'll just say also in doing the pre-reading, and this is also very linked to what Commissioner Sauvé was saying, in one of the approaches, I think it was in the pink tape approach, they effectively talked about having someone help walk through the entire process, right? So because it's not just zoning, it is also engineering and I think that to understand where the pain points are. And so similarly, like all of the trash collection stuff isn't zoning, but it impacts it. And so I think that an audit of where are their pain points, and I think it was technically under the pink tape or zoning approach, that resonated with me. I thought that was really close to what I had hoped that we could achieve through unzoning.
Thanks, Commissioner Mills. Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I really like that idea of the pain points. Trash is a pain point for me right now, actually. So I think for number 3, like, it's not enough, but I think it would be a good place to start. I mean, the UDP is really overwhelming and the language gets a little bit jargony and it's kind of hard to read. Like sometimes I try to read it and I have a background in planning and I'm just like, what am I reading? So I think like going through like the audit and the copy editing maybe together, just like what can we take out? Like I think the tables are really good and really clear. It's like the text that gets kind of heavy. So I think that could be a good place to start to try to see what could be cut out. Sounds like a really good intern project. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where my head is at to start, because this is a really big thing to try to do. And I guess I keep thinking too, like, how does this intersect with the comp plan? I guess maybe in like the zoning districts, are they going to be looking at like, they're going to be looking at like recommendations for like the districts themselves, I would imagine.
Yes,
Maybe.
so I imagine as well, and there were things that were peeled off in your work program that we intended to be tackled through the comprehensive plan process, because we want to respect that process. It's a robust special thing. There are a lot of stakeholders who are being engaged, not only a separate subcommittee of the Planning Commission, but also a steering committee and some internal technical advisors, other technical advisors, from what I understand. So some of the items that were just brought up in conversation, for example, lot size, setback review, trying to think of some other ones that intersected here.
FAR?
But not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
I don't necessarily see that as conflicting if we wanted to take that on and look at it. I'm would like to hear Ms. DeLeo's thoughts on that. But I just wanted to recap that for certain large picture things, we know that they are connected to the UDC and that there is a wide range of things that need to change. The kind of in the weeds and surgical nature of what our task is here is figuring out if the comprehensive plan work program topics, and even things that are not identified in that column in the work program will be managed, by the consultant team in concert with staff, steering committee input, and the comprehensive plan subcommittee. And then as specific ordinance recommendations are made through that process, they'll be fed into the ordinance revisions committee for discussion and research. What can we do nevertheless to meet the spirit of zoning simplification while not interfering with this other parallel process? And that's the needle that I think Alexis and I are trying to thread to determine where do we start, what are concrete and discrete things that we can do to make progress, to be responsive to the requests that we receive from the Planning Commission and from you all, to be useful as a committee, while not interfering or overlapping with another
process. Yeah.
Literally comprehensive process. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I
mean-
would just echo the same thing, where to draw the line, how much to sort of set up to make that work easier. How much to set up to make it work easier versus that. I can take an educated guess, and I'm gonna think that the comp plan is ultimately would say broad topics. Like it might support our idea of collapsing zoning districts. But maybe it won't specify which ones, and maybe it would. I don't think it's going to talk about our review procedures and process. Maybe it would have something broad like review your procedures and process to help streamline to achieve these goals. Because I think the comp plan is it's mostly goal setting when it boils down to it, but it's not. Usually, it's not a recipe for implementation, and that's where. Or if it is, it's in the appendix. And so I think that's the piece to bridge the gap, the recipe to implement what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the process to do that. I mean, I feel like this is a big undertaking and is probably going to take just as much time as a comp plan. Maybe not, but if there's opportunities for us to do the homework thing again, I think I'd be happy to take a deep dive into part of something and come back and say what I don't know. The UDC is daunting, so it scares me, but I'm happy to
setting up specific research directions or directions to do further homework on as a part of this topic would be great if we could identify some of those things. So for example, if there's different ways that we could do it. We could do it by topic. We can just go from top to bottom. We could assign sections. We could decide to tackle one specific thing like FAR versus height and come back together with ideas about where that shows up in the code and recommendations for how it could be streamlined. So open to your thoughts. I think we've done a good job of describing the kind of fine line that we're trying to walk, but also giving, making specific improvements without overstepping another process. And I also want to say, well, I'll let you sit with that and think for a second. Some of the things that have been mentioned, audit of pain points, that is something that is going on in an ongoing way. There's an internal staff review team focused on development improvement. I'm specifically working with the Public Services Chief of Staff, Sky Stewart, to help to kind of break loose process improvements that happen just because we're in different departments and there are many teams that are involved in development review. And we've seen already some improvements from that. It's slow work, just like this is. There's also a series of interviews that were undertaken of developers and many others who are part of the development review process at various points in time. I think there were 30 interviews or so, and Heather Saferth conducted those interviews, and they're still being summarized right now. Those are sitting in the office of our assistant city manager, who was asked to present also on some directions in that regard to city council. So I'm checking in periodically with his office to determine how we can take the synthesis of those interviews, feed them into our work. We've received a preview, but not the full document with the summary. So I just want to point out that there are some things that, no, they're very important. They're not strictly in the UDC. We are aware of them, and there are some ongoing improvement projects to direct energy to those various things.
Thank you. I think,
So, yeah,
Commissioner Sauvé, yeah, you were up.
I just wanted to add, like, I guess in terms of an audit, there's kind of like a communication, like what's doing well for communication or not. But then I think that, like, it's like, are there ordinances that we want to modify? Are there ordinances that we want to remove? And then are there ordinances that we want to add? Right? I think about like the EV parking ordinance. That was like an ad, like that didn't exist before, right? We were talking about adding an ordinance similar for solar, you know, like front yard solar, like it didn't get adopted. Now we want to add that in. So I guess I'm kind of curious, because in my mind, like FAR, it's like removing FAR because it's redundant to height. In my logic, removing lot size is redundant to setbacks. You know, we can argue a couple different ways, but like those are both like removal things which would fit under unzoning, that then we could like pluck away things that deserve more attention relative to the comprehensive plan. But I'm trying to think of like a way to audit, to say like, here's a bunch of other stuff. Here's like a 10-year work plan about like modify and add things. But we're just trying to distill down to things to remove that might be redundant. I really think that's it, because like some redundancy can also be contradictory sometimes, right? I think there were conversations like the club, like we've seen so many projects that like hurdled the club and we're like, just get rid of a conflicting land use buffer sort of thing. Like what other things are there like that we can just like make a list of as homework, maybe, of if we just think about the removal category, not the change. What could we take a Sharpie to and just redact and we wouldn't miss? That would be my first way to audit. Just kind of putting it to the table.
I'm wondering how many of those things we think are out there that have not already come up during proposed business and are somewhere on that spreadsheet. Like, I'm not saying there aren't any. I'm just kind of wondering how many, like, if there are a vast number. I feel like a lot of things come up. We talk about them. I think they end up on a list somewhere, but maybe Mix Kelly, you could confirm or deny that that's true. But I think we've talked about things like front yard solar and clubs and I had another in my mind.
Alexis, correct me if I'm wrong, but was the solar item that you just put into Legistar for City Council the item in question that's being referenced here along with clubs? Can you just maybe give a summary on where the status of some of those items of interest?
Yeah. So aside, but interesting news for you that is related. There are 4 ordinance type things that are going to go to the December 19th, if I have that date right. December 18th. We have planning has put 4 things on the December 18th City Council agenda. First reading of the Plymouth Road TC1 rezoning petition. First reading of the banquet hall. It's actually a banquet hall text amendment that was to add banquet halls as a permitted use. It was petitioned to add event space, but our review and analysis concluded that the matching term in the building code was banquet hall. Third is the conflicting land use buffer, the changes to code related to conflicting land use buffer. And the fourth was increasing the flexibility, removing some of the restrictions on the solar panels as a accessory structure in the front yard of residential districts. So we got 4 things going for first reading on December 18th, and I don't have the date in my head, but that would then translate, that's the second council meeting of December. So these things, if passed, would go to the second council meeting in January for adoption.
Thanks. It
I guess just
related.
for a point of clarification, like I know those things were happening as an example of the 1-by-1 piecemeal, that an audit would collect them all through 300 pages instead of just doing one, like just doing the club, then just doing the front yard solar, right? Like I'm like looking at page 50 right now. It's like hospitals in R4 have a special exception standard of 1,500 square feet of lot area per bed.
Well,
I don't know if I
what
missed it, if we
no,
play
no.
it through the examples, like that's a weird one. Like, why is that still in there?
Yeah.
Like, if we went through 300 pages, that might be quite a list.
Yeah. Well, I see where a little bit weeds, but like there are some uses. If you uses are the non-residential stuff is floor area FAR. The residential stuff is basically the base is dwelling units. It's just dwelling units. So it's you can talk about its front doors or its kitchens, but it's dwelling units. But there are some uses that are not full-on dwelling units, and so that would be like hospitals, nursing homes. They're not full-on dwelling units. Hotels, not full-on dwelling units. So those are the ones that go by bedroom. That's in the weeds. The bigger picture, I think, would be, I think to my advice, not my requirements, my advice is we could spend a meeting or we can work now, but I think there are broad categories, broad sections. The use table could definitely use like a mini audit. And when I say mini, like not necessarily page 1 to page 350. Let's look at the use table. The use table, I cannot even tell you where the origins of the use table are, but surely somebody just wrote up the uses, and if it's not permitted, if it's not listed, it's prohibitive. So that's a question to talk about. Do we switch our format to continue listing the individual uses, and if it's not permitted, it's prohibited? Do you flip the districts around and you talk about, well, everything is allowed except these are the prohibited items? Not sure if we want to approach that, but still, our table and the banquet hall thing sort of highlights we use different nomenclature these days. There's different categories. There's certainly consolidation, and so maybe looking at the use table could be a project. And then there's the use specific standards. And then it's a review of like, do we still care about, are those things still super important to us? The fundamental basis of our zoning ordinance is separation of land uses. I think times have changed. Land is more valuable. I don't think we need as much separation even in our minds. So that's not only going through the use table, but take a look, each one of them. The use specific standards, are they that important? Are they serving us well? And then a whole different project would be the dimensional tables. Where's there overlap? Where's there overlap? Where's there not? Looking at the actual standards and individual standards themselves. We've done work in this regard over the years and decades. You may recall Jeff Kahn did a big project. We called it area height and placement, and we went through the zoning ordinance and we standardized some stuff through the zoning ordinance, through the dimensional standards table, match stuff, standardized stuff. The thing we didn't do was consolidate districts. And at some point, if you either have districts that have so many overlap in uses and or so much overlap in dimensional standards, there's your recipe for consolidating districts. So in summary of my rambling talk, I think we can chunk out the work and maybe we can take a look at one by one, take a look at the use table, the actual names of uses listed. Are we getting at the categories we want? Have we missed something? Should we add? Should we subtract? Can we consolidate? The other thing would be look at our use specific standards, see if they're holding up to the test of time, and then also our dimensional standards. I think perhaps the project could also be like, just look at other people's codes. Do they have a better use table than we do or not?
Commissioner Mills.
I like the idea of just starting somewhere. One of the things that I would just say, yes, it's 305 pages, but actually the sections that we're talking about really only go until 170. Like everything after that is kind of procedures. So there's a lot that can be done at the first part, potentially, or it's all not looking at all 300 pages. I want to say, so if we divide out and give somebody the use table and somebody another 10 pages to kind of look at, I mean, I'm cool with doing that, you know, marking up what our recommended changes are to bring back to a future meeting.
I think maybe just a thought I'm having as we're having this conversation is, I think it's important though for us to keep our eye on the prize in a way. Like, what are we trying to achieve here? I mean, I think we always could think of ways to make it better, but I think it's maybe important to weigh the amount of time and effort it will take and what we gain from doing it. So like, I guess I'm just I think there are some things we could change that would have big impact. And there are some things we could change that would make the document cleaner, clearer, more consistent, and would maybe have very little impact in actually like whatever the goal is. What is the goal? Cheaper development, quicker development, kinds of development, you know, so, and maybe back to Commissioner Sauvé's point, like, is it about, are there things that we need to add because we want to make sure we're regulating something like EV charging, or is it about removing things because we want to make things less restrictive or more clear? So for me, I actually think like articulating the goals might be a first step before deciding what's more important, use tables, dimensional tables, etc. Or neither of those, or like, should we be doing the audit, or should we be doing a lot of research into eliminating single family zoning, you know, or something which I know is going to be part of the comp plan process, but like, are there things that not that eliminating single family zoning is part of the process, but looking at zoning will be part of the process. Is there anything we can do to, I think what you said, Mix Kelly, is like support and prepare the comp plan process, but not supersede or interfere with it. So I don't know, maybe, yeah, I'm just wondering a little bit about that. Like, I guess maybe to be more direct, like, I think it's true that the use table probably has a lot of things about it that are strange that could use revision. But do we have a sense of like how much of an impediment to development the use table is? Maybe it is something that really gets in the way and causes a lot of stress and costs a lot of money for people, but I don't know.
My initial thoughts are not the use table itself, perhaps the use specific standards that
like there are things like that maybe don't make sense to us, but I wonder what kind of impact it would have to change them and to take the time to change them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that whatever we do, the most bang for our buck is going to focus on Articles 3, 4, and 5. If anyone recalls from back when when we were Zorroing, the Article 1 is like legalese. No one reads it. Doesn't matter. No one's going to read it. It doesn't matter. Article 2 is the intent statements. And that's also fluff. It's not regulatory. There's no bang for your buck focusing on that. Article 3 is the use standard, the use is permitted. Article 4 is the development standards, and Article 5 is the procedures. That's the meat and potatoes. I think that 6 talks about the non-conforming section, and 7 is the enforcement or vice versa. And there's not much streamlining that we could do there. And then the last is the definitions, and it just takes as many pages as it takes to define these things. But we could make a lot of improvements to the look and feel of 3, 4, and 5, less clear about the impact that will have on our goals, partially because we do need to define our goals.
Of those 3, Alexis, which would you say, I mean, we could assign one of those, we could like assign these sections in teams. We could all come together and start with 3, then move on to 4, then move on to 5.
There's no wrong answer there. It's
Appreciate the framing, and I think you're right that there's probably improvements to be made across all 3 of those, and they, especially based on your description, appear to be where we would want to direct this committee's efforts. Is that still too broad, Commissioner Abrams, for what you had in mind, or is that helpful?
So my internet went down and I left, I was frozen for like 2 minutes. So I missed everything you guys were just saying.
Okay, lightning round, Alexis. Can you recap?
we just solved world peace. Of the various articles, Article 1 is the intent statement. That is, Article 1 and 2 are like legalese, and nobody even reads it. There's no bang for your buck there other than simply making it shorter. Article 3, 4, and 5. 3 is the permitted uses. 4 are the development standards. 5 are the procedures. That's where the meat and potatoes are. And then at the end, there's the enforcement section, the non-conformity section, and the definitions. There's not much, other than making those shorter, there's not much benefits to be gained from streamlining those. So that's what our work should focus on, 3, 4, and 5, because that's what is that's the meat and potatoes. I've said it like 6 times, and that's the stupidest phrase ever, but there you go.
That makes sense. And I think even, I can't remember who, but somebody I thought was making a case for actually focusing on 3 and 4 first before 5.
Sure.
Mhm.
Well, since there are, 4 folks on the commission, 2 staff members, we could divide those 2 articles, 2 people with, and then, you can loop in staff as needed between now and our next meeting, which is later on in tonight's agenda, but would be in February.
So long from now. Mm-hmm.
It feels long. The holidays do sort of fly by fast, and they also make the calendaring for public meetings very strange.
No, I know. And I know, I understand that the comp plan process is being prioritized as it should be. How does that strike you all, commissioners?
I think that sounds good, but I do think before we get off this, or we should, we can split it up, but what are we doing? What is the goal? And maybe the two articles have different goals, but let's at least define one for each, or one general.
Would it be helpful if we actually looked through some of the text of those articles right now to get a sense of them and be less in theoretics?
Yeah, I've been doing that in the background, and I keep coming back to you guys.
Like 18 screens open, and currently the UDC is not one, but I can easily pull it up.
I have it saved on my desktop.
For our listening public, a2gov.org/UDC will take you to the most recent published version of the Unified Development Code. I have a bunch of sticky notes and markups on mine right now, and some of them won't make sense to other people. Do you have a clean copy of Alexis by any chance?
I have all the copies. Would you would you like the web version or just a PDF
Whatever's
document?
easiest to scan through and hop around in. Right now, if we go to Article 3 first use regulations.
Loading. And okay.
Maybe while it's adding, I'll add the in use regulations is 44 pages. Development standards is longer, but development standards, I do just want to highlight, like, we recently passed the whole sign chunk, the whole outdoor lighting chunk, and I believe we reevaluated fences too last year. So the last 3 sections are all pretty recently reviewed. So hopefully already clean, more like cleaner relative to the length of those 2 sections and what's actually in them.
Signs is pretty wordy.
Signs is very wordy, but we just did it.
Yeah.
It seemed like a lot of legal, freedom of speech stuff to make sure we had in there too.
Yeah. I'll make it a little bit smaller to go faster. So this is 3, the use regulations. It's go on. Tables. Ginormous multi-page table. The first table is primary uses. Lists every use that we can think of individually. Also lists all of the various all of our zoning districts, and I will not go through this all, but you can see I'm going fast. I'm trying to get to a better. There are, where it is, here we go. There we go. There are broad categories, public and institutional. Then underneath that, there are some categories. There's a community and cultural category, and then things are listed. And then there is a daycare category, educational category. And this goes on and on and on. So you'll see that there are, you can sort of move up a level and list and consolidate within those. We don't have to drill down so deep. That's an approach. Also, you'll see we have residential group, a mixed use group, and a non-residential special purpose. And just here on the screen, you can see that generally, like, the R1s are already grouped all together. So the same uses are permitted no matter what version or flavor of R1 it is. But the R1s and R2s and R3s are so similar, allow the same uses. That's could be right for consolidation, but also in the mixed use categories, there's virtually no use differences. Not virtually, but in a lot of cases, the same use is permitted in every single one of these. It sort of dilutes the differentiation of the districts. It causes you to question, why are there such differentiation of districts? And if you just go down, there's also a table. We're still in the primary. Now here's the accessory use table. Same type stuff. And then we have a temporary use table. And then in this number, Article 3, then we move into use specific standards. I will go up. Every time you see in this column, if there's a section number, it means there's a specific use standard for that particular thing. There's more regulations, special. And it takes a lot of words to provide all of those. It starts with residential uses, grouping, and moves on through and it matches up with those broad categories in the use table, moves on to public and institutional uses. Here's all the things. What do we got? With commercial, after that, I think would be office. And it just goes on and on and on, all of these special standards. And I think some of them could, you know, you could be much more succinct with the same exact standards with a lot of copy editing, or you could go through and see, like, do you need all of these very specific standards? And I'll just fast forward then. So after these use regulations are Article 4 are development standards. And I think the bookmarks on the side are sort of helpful. It goes, I'm going to minimize a bunch so that we can actually see them on the thing. But in Article 4, first we have the area height placement regulations. Those are all the tables. Then we have some special dimensional and site layout standards. Then we go to parking, landscaping, streets, stormwater, natural features, signs, outdoor lighting, and fences. And there are various numbers of pages for each one of them. And the last is administrative procedures, but that's enough for this moment. Any other orientation that, should I drill deeper into one spot?
I'll take dibs on use. I guess I'll just go start the conversation there. I know earlier, maybe going all the way back to banquet halls, I built my own spreadsheet around this, and I have a few columns of the Michigan Building Code to understand what might be synonymous uses. And then, because I don't know, Alexis, you have a table somewhere, but I didn't have that Excel table that gets put into this Word doc and PDF. So I built my own, but like it's interesting because then you can like shuffle the cells based on which ones match and like recategorize them in a lot of different ways. And so, plus I love a spreadsheet. So at least starting with that, I can visualize it a bit better. So, and I already built it. So I'd love to kind of share it out and let other people critique it and work on that more.
I can see where if we do, I don't mean to be causing like dizziness, but under sales, I feel like this seems ripe for consolidation. And if you have a more broad definition of sales, then perhaps you don't need all of these individual definitions. But you know, there's a lot of individual definitions of sales. There's a lot of individual definitions of services and repair. That just strikes me. I've not done any research on it, but it just strikes me as this seems like working on a more broad and inclusive definition might provide a lot of bang for buck in these particular areas. Not sure if it's going to help in our, say, residential categories, because they're fairly distinct. Our definition of residential are just single family, two family, multifamily. There's not many flavors of residential, but in the sales, in services and repair, there's a lot of flavors of the same thing.
I remember you're referring to the spreadsheet, Lisa, that you shared with us that align and compare side by side with the Michigan Building Code?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And I liked it at the time. I have referenced it since, and I think that would be a perfect exercise to dive into how we are thinking about and putting parameters around uses. So I'm glad that you are interested in that section. And I'd love to bring some of the thinking that you have around harmonizing with the building code into this exercise. That would be wonderful.
Relatedly, I think I'm vaguely remembering, I mean, some of the use specific standards are about minimum square footage per occupant, right? Like you brought that up for the hospital, but it's also for other things. That's covered in building code too, yeah?
Yeah, there's occupancy definitions and codes for specifics. So I can check, right? Like outpatient hospital is 100 square feet. Institutional inpatient is 240 square feet per person. So it's regulated by per person, not room. So
Yeah.
it's a little different, but it could be a way to just like build a report as homework to compare. Could you reformat some of it to match in a way? So at least your units are the similar.
There, and I was just gonna say, like, my skimming, not of the table, but below in Article 3, a lot of these use specific standard call outs are real, like 400 square feet per whatever is the unit, per person or more or less. And so this might be a place where if the building code is covering it instead and it's pretty close, is that a way to like simplify it? And so I appreciate you who know the building code, since I don't. Like I would just put that in there, and I'm either happy to tag along to Article 3 or do a first pass, work on Article 4, do a first pass on Article 4. I have no specific desire, so whatever makes sense.
Yeah. I will just point out that they are supposed to work in like harmony. They're not in direct conflict. The building code is how much square feet in that actual bedroom do you need? And what the zoning is trying to do is just say it's a measure of density, because a hospital doesn't have dwelling units, it has beds. It's saying like how much lot area. So it's a measure of density. So the zoning ordinance is not saying that the hospital room needs to be 400 square feet, not. But the density is 1 person per 400 square feet of lot area. But this is more, so addressing that standard is more analogous to just removing the FAR. Like, do you care so much about how many people are on that lot, or do you just care about the physical dimensions? If it's behind the setback, meets the height limit. But they are trying to get at coordinating, but not identical things.
I think that's, and this is like in the weeds, but a curiosity of mine that I might just run it, like scenario planning, right? It's like pick 3 weird lots that are different and run a hospital on all of them and see like, does the math match up, or is there a weird anomaly that they don't, that you could put a lot more people, but not a lot more building, or vice versa, sort of thing. So like, would they match up enough to eliminate zoning because the building code would take care of it? Or do we need both of them? And I think that's where it's this tricky thing where we have to do some scenario designs to see if the outcomes are actually measurable and predictable with ordinances we have, or we would have to write.
Is anyone else interested in joining Commissioner Save in Article 3 and diving into uses? Anyone feel passionate about that? And then we could just, through our powers of deductive reasoning, place 2 other committee members on Article 2. Or, sorry, not 2.
4.
I mean, I guess I have a slight preference for 4. I'll do whatever. So,
Same.
Commissioner Abrams, if you.
No, I think same slight preference for 4, but we'll do whatever. But I think I'm also just like a little hung up on what the goal is.
That's the other thing I was just gonna.
So I might want a bit of whatever my assignment is. Maybe if other people have some clarity about how they would approach that assignment, then I would welcome some guidance there. I mean, I can look at a document and I can just like scan it for inconsistencies or things that don't make sense or things that I think, are contradictory with another regulation or at odds with itself. But again, I'm just not sure is that our goal? I mean, in some ways I think, I don't mean to throw a wrench in things, but like in some ways I feel like this is on the table because we had kind of like big frustrations with things like site plan light. I know that's different, but like something like that, or, maybe just minimum lot sizes in residential districts or things that we just saw that were so kind of apparently in need of being fixed. Now, and I'm not sure, I don't know that this is going to get at that. if this is going to achieve that kind of outcome. But I also,
Well,
I'm also happy to like go with the flow if other people see value in this, and I will, it will become visible to me through the process. And so I'm also willing to just kind of like be assigned a thing and do it and see how the process unfolds and give it some time. So
Well, one thing that almost everyone mentioned in the definition kind of exercise that we had at the beginning of the meeting was zone collapse. And a precursor to collapsing zones would be to harmonize uses in similar districts. I think this is what Alexis was getting at somewhat with, let's take a closer eye at what's allowed in R1, A, B, C, D, E versus R2A or 2B. So doing some of the pre-work to figure out if uses can be harmonized and make sense across districts that might be candidates for collapse would be really helpful step in their eventual consolidation. That's one thought.
If I can, I would chime in. So that is still talking about Article 3, but the same is true for Article 4, because the thing where this came up, I think a lot, and that is for like setbacks and height limits, right? Like some of the C's are very similar. Like D1 and D2 are quite different in terms of height, but in terms of uses and even some of the other standards, I think one of the things that came out of the discussion about which zone, I don't know, maybe it was the religious assembly or banquet halls or whatever. Like, how are these two operationally different other than an intent statement that like maybe is slightly different? So I think that comparison would also mix, Kelly, like I'm just adding on in case you disagree. I think that we could take that same idea into Article 4, which maybe Commissioner Abrams helps you understand what could be done there. Like, are there things that are just very, very similar functionally?
Can I share screen of this spreadsheet? I want to show an example, if maybe it's helpful to visualize.
I think so, as a member of the
I
webinar.
don't know if I just took it over. So maybe an example, because I can move cells around on this one instead of going through it in the static PDF form. Sales, as Alexis pointed out, we have we have many categories, right? But these three, retail sales, restaurant, and outdoor sales, all have the same permitted. And likewise, C1A and C1B all have the same uses allowed. So like those all match, that could collapse both in their row and their column. But where they're different is in section 4, because C1A might have a certain height and C1B has a different height. And so that, I think, Ellie, is like, if you go into those tables, the development regulations for all of those zoning districts, it's like, how far off are they? Is it 150 and 200% FAR? Like, are those enough to collapse? And so it may be like, I'm not sure, like maybe it is, we're all taking a look at use in a certain way to have a lens to look at development standards. I don't know if that's more helpful, because like development standards is a bit more weedy and you almost have to react to use in a way. I don't know, Alexis, you work through this.
Yeah, well, I was gonna chime in, and you've inadvertently pointed out like two distinct things. Words are starting to escape me this evening. But I have, in editing the UDC, I have played around with literally collapsing, just like R1A / E is already collapsed in the UDC, a single column, and they happen to have all. I have played around with collapsing the C1s. There's 4 of them. Mm-hmm. But that is strictly like, I want to say editorial. That's but I played around, and where it fell apart was there's just 1 or 2, there's just enough where something is not allowed. Yeah, you've highlighted one. There's
Right.
just enough where there's exceptions, then it starts to look messier than if you keep them together. But that is strictly formatting. And we can go through that exercise, but I mean, that's administrative. I don't know if that's worth the ordinance revisions committee time, because that's just administrative. But where the policy question is, so should the actual districts be combined? And that involves also looking here, but also the zoning map. And I will only say, like my historian in the weeds comment about, we have, and we kind of did it with TC1, and we fall into the trap. It's such a hard, the pitfall is so huge and you can't avoid it. But somebody asks for something, someone gets an idea for something, and we create a new district. M1A isn't the only difference in M1A, because somebody asked for auto dealerships to be permitted at a certain address. And somehow we didn't want to add auto to M1, so we created an M1A. And you can see, I think this is what happened with like C1B. Like, oh, we really like this idea, but it's a little bit, let's create a whole new district. And I think that our zest and zeal for separate land uses, I think that era is over. But that's the policy decisions that I think could really benefit. But it's not just because I can like literally collapse those columns without changing the meat of them. But what the policy and what what I can't make, I'm not enabled, I don't want to make the decisions about, should we literally just make C1 and C1A, for example, randomly? Nope, we'll rezone. We'll make all of C1A into C1 on the map, like just less districts overall, less choice of districts, and which are separate.
I think, sorry.
But I'm just saying, like, that's a separate question and goal from making the table have less columns.
Right. I think this exercise is highlighting where to ask that second question. It's not about collapsing. It's saying, okay, now we go, right? Ellie's team now has a focus area, right? Using the use as the first homework is going to highlight the filter of what we look at in the development standards chapter.
Yeah.
Because now we can test, like, okay, these pretty much match. Step one, are we comfortable with whatever couple deviations are here across these four, right? Step two, are we comfortable with these deviations collapsing? And what's the averaging?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of homework Ellie's team would then do. Sorry, Ellie, you're captain of the team. Sorry. Like, right, like if the question of like who reads each chapter, it's kind of a feedback loop between the two.
I mean, I think it's, I mean, maybe another way to put it is just to say, here's what it would mean to collapse all the C1s. It would mean adding this permitted use, making this go from a special exception to a permitted use. And it would mean that the height limits, instead of being 35, 60, and 80, become 70. I don't know, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it would just be a case study in that. I think, you know, just to keep beating my little drum, like, what do we think it would achieve in our community to collapse those into one district? Like, I think we assume it's a good thing, but I think we should articulate the benefit.
I think that's where, like, you have to get into the codes of, like, the weeds of the code to see, like, once you get into the development standards, looking across C1, you're like, well, why are we restricting C1 more than C1AR? Are we okay with opening it up and leaning towards the most flexible version of C1? Right? If there are four versions, one of them is more restrictive.
So I think,
I'm
but that's
assuming.
helpful to even just say that and say,
Yeah.
okay, from the beginning, the goal is less restriction.
Yeah.
not to make the more looser, less restrictive ones more restricted, right? So
Mhm.
like that's the orientation. Yeah.
Right, so it'd
And
be
I think
like-
more about Article 4 than 3 in a way.
'Cause- yeah.
3 allows us to see. I understand you're saying 3. The analysis of 3, Article 3 allows us to. It gives us a filter or a lens through which to look at possible revisions to Article 4.
Mhm. So like telephone exchange or wireless communication facilities, it's permitted, banned, special exception. So it's like, are we comfortable with making that permitted across the board?
Mhm.
That's the least restrictive, right? Or are we okay with making designated marijuana consumption facility a special exception in C1? Right? Like just
And then I
spread
think
that needle further.
And then to Alexis's point, then we need to go to the map and we need to say, well, where is C1? What would it mean for it to have an E in that column versus having where's C1A, where's B, where's AR? So yeah,
Mhm.
got it. Okay.
And maybe like that's unzoning because we are simplifying zoning districts. And then the next step is the development standards, right? So if
Mhm.
we think about back to Deputy Kelly's question of like, what is this? What's the definition? It's like, we should probably start with zoning before we start thinking about the development standard within a zoning district.
Hmm.
My take.
Okay. So maybe Hank and Alexis, are we threading your needle or are we?
I think so. This is sufficiently in the weeds. This is not the level of review that is going to be covered in the comprehensive plan. But from what I'm hearing, if we want to use one chapter as the lens for the other, it may not make sense to divide people into teams yet. It might make sense to just go all in on that chapter, coordinate and discuss, and then have a next steps discussion or maybe a findings discussion that's devoted to this in your February meeting. Not the most fun news to share, and also repeating myself, staff time is limited to devote to this. We have another retiring planner who has announced their retirement in mid-January, which means that we are stopping assigning new long-term development review to Planner Chang starting immediately, which means that Ms. DeLeo and Mr. Kowalski are our primary development reviewers, and with support from Planner Thatcher, whose time is almost entirely devoted to managing our historic preservation coordination, historic district commission, and a high volume of permit requests in that regard. We have obtained some outside planning assistance through expanding an on-call contract. There are some limits to, because of the highly coordinated nature of what we do, needing to be responsive to people by phone, email, have specific office hours, and also talk to other staff. There's limits to the types of work that we can assign out. So I just want to do that. Not extremely fun for, the ambitions of what we'd like to accomplish, but just realistically where we are at with staff capacity. We are working with HR, talking to them almost daily to post Planner Kahan's position. It should be posted very soon. In some.
That was going to be my next question. Like, what is the process for hiring new planners? So you answered it.
So I guess I have a follow-on question. If we focus on, where did it go in my notes?
Well, I don't think we need all 4 of us to focus on Article 3 on the use table. I feel like in some ways Lisa's already done it. I don't know if there's like a lot more work. Also, Commissioner Cive will not be here at the February meeting.
That is another thing I was going to bring
So
up.
there needs to be some process of, handing off, your,
I have my spreadsheet. Keep
but
going.
also, you know, also your synthesis, your knowledge, your input, your contribution, and then, which we would be very grateful for, and then taking it from there. So I don't know if there's a different kind of homework, or if we just, I mean, we could all take Lisa's spreadsheet and see if we draw similar or same conclusions, but it might be a little redundant. Yeah, Commissioner Mills.
What was striking me is we've already identified at least a couple of the districts where we would want to look in Article 4 for like what would the ramifications of collapsing some amount of C be. Similarly, already there are some areas actually that Ms. Leo highlighted that are collapsed. So M, the uses are already collapsed. Like, is that another one where we could explore? So maybe there's a couple targeted things. The other thing that I don't want to lose that's really in Article 4 is not collapsing districts, but ditching some metrics entirely for a district. And that gets back to the FAR versus, like, I mean, I know not all the districts have FAR and height. It's one or the other, but like, that's one of the things. But I think just reading through it, and again, I'm happy to take that part on, to see if there's anything else that's not about collapsing districts as much as just ditching redundancy, belt and suspenders things.
So that would be more in Article 4. That's more in development standards, you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I don't, because I'm not a developer, like, I don't know what all of those things are, but I can at least say, like, do we really need this? And I'm happy to go through that section just because sometimes it's good to read the UDC cover to cover. It's been a while.
Only if you haven't
That's
signed
kind of
it.
what I was thinking too. Like, it would be good to just read it. So
Like,
I'll read both.
do we
I don't
have
care.
this? It doesn't even make sense. It never gets brought up. Like, I mean, that's one of the things that I kind of want to be able to do. And then, my sense is it would be easier, honestly, if we had it in, do we have it in a Word doc version that we can add comment boxes along the way?
Oh, I can share that with you. It is it is one Word document. It's enormous. I think maybe it'd be easier if I, like, or when you get it, cut out Article 1 and Article 2 and Article 5, 6, and 7, or 7, 8. Just, it's a beast to work with. It's just a matter of logistics. I have it in Word, happy to share. It's a beast.
I mean, you can also mark up a PDF.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, how do we, if multiple of us are putting this together, like, how do we actually share and combine things?
Well, then it needs to be a Google Doc or something that we can collaboratively author, right? Or mark up. Yeah, Commissioner Survey.
I guess that was my, like, with Open Meetings Act collaborative documents, is that, I think that'd be a question.
That's a good question. I mean, the four of you don't constitute a quorum. If you have an email thread on something and you're not able to pass commission business in secret, it's also content that is I mean, we are able to host online documents, but they kind of, I think they have to be within our city email domain in order to access. So I can look into that further. I don't feel comfortable saying definitively that it would be no problem, but I suspect that there are ways to do this. I mean, subcommittees have to work. I can ask how that is handled for other subcommittees, but my unofficial gut response is that having a working document that you all share, that it has comments on it related to the UDC, is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. You could have that I think anyway, as people who know each other who do not constitute a quorum of the commission, but I can check on that.
Okay. Okay, so maybe to start wrapping things up, I think, so Mix Kelly, you'll get back to us about the possibility of a collaboratively authored document. And if not, then we'll just kind of individually work on it through PDF or Microsoft Word. And then bring our ideas together in February. Commissioner Sauvé has already produced this spreadsheet and will, I think, do a little bit of analysis and maybe find a time to hand off. You want to hand off to me? Does that work, Commissioner Sauvé?
Yeah, I'll just plan to have all of my work completed for December, and
Or the
I'll
end.
actually just hand it over to Debbie Kelly to hold the documents. Just like
Okay.
if that works. I mean, I can, and to you as well, so that there's both a commissioner and a staff person that has it. But I'll try to put together just like a report of kind of some of my findings of opportunities within the use side.
Sure.
As
Save you
like
time though, if you
pre-homework
don't want to
deliverable.
to save you time if you don't want to produce a formal written document. I think you also could, we could have a
Yeah, I'll
conversation.
be notes and stuff. Yeah, but I'll package
Okay.
something.
And then Commissioner Mills, I think you have an idea about something you want to look at in Article 4, things like FAR and height and any other regulations that maybe are at odds or redundant with each other. And then Commissioner Hammerschmidt, what?
I don't know.
There's no need for busy work. So I think also if it makes sense to just, if something.
No, I mean, I want to read through both
Yeah.
sections, and I don't know. If it's not a violation of OMA, then I can just email you guys separately if I come up with anything brilliant, or just to check in. I don't know. I'm going to try to get through this like by the end of the year.
Okay.
And then I don't know if it makes sense for us to meet before or talk before February, so that we, like maybe in January sometime.
Yeah, are we allowed to do that?
Just the 4 of us, or even 3 of us. Lisa, you're gone somewhere? No.
Resigned.
You resigned?
Sorry, I thought
I
everyone
didn't
knew
know that.
Yeah.
No.
That's why Lisa won't be here in February.
Oh, I just assumed you were traveling.
Sorry.
Okay, well then the 3 of us, I guess could. It sounds like it's not a violation if we get together.
Okay.
I don't think that should be a problem. I'll just run some of the questions around the document sharing with our city attorney's office and the planning manager and get back to you all by email.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. Anything else for this item on our agenda? All right, so we'll move now then to item 4, our second opportunity for public comment. So if you'd like to address the Ordinance Revisions Committee. Yeah.
Isn't there an item before that?
For some reason that's coming later. It's item 6, but we can, do you want to switch it around?
I think it should be switched. Usually that's the final item.
Okay.
I'm not sure why that happened that way, but
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so item 5 is communication, which I don't think there was anything in the packet. Item 6 is our 2024 meeting schedule.
yes, so this is a little bit of a departure from past practice, because in the past you just had the planning commission calendar, and the planning commission calendar is adopted. That's being prepared for 2024 right now. The 4th Tuesday of the month is reserved for a subcommittee activity or commission committee activity. Because of all of the different actors and stakeholders who are involved in the comprehensive plan subcommittee, I've talked with Manager Leonard about this, and right now he doesn't feel comfortable always committing to that date for that subcommittee. Also because of other conversations, staff constraints that we've had in the ORC, we decided to go to a bi-monthly model. And I know that people want to be clear about their calendars. So I worked with our administrative assistant, Courtney Manor, to just put together some dates that we could agree on would be reserved for ORC. And that's the purpose here, is to just make sure there's not confusion about when we would meet. To not meet in months that are very busy and have funky scheduling, primarily due to public holidays, and just remove ambiguity. So if you all are comfortable with this, it does not have to be formally adopted. It's just to circulate for that purpose.
Great, thank you. Any questions or discussion points around the proposed schedule? It means we meet 5 times in 2024, February, April, June, August, and October. Okay. Thank you. I always appreciate knowing what's coming on my calendar, so it's very helpful.
I thought as much. Okay, we happy to move to public comment.
Okay. Now we can move to public comment. So if you would like to address the Ordinance Revisions Committee of the Planning Commission, you may do so by raising your hand in Zoom. And you would have 3 minutes to address the commission. And we would ask you to state your name and address for the record. We'll give it 1 minute. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to close the public hearing. I mean, the public comment. And I think that was the last item on our agenda, so we can adjourn. Thanks all. Have a good evening.
Thank you all very much. Talk with you all soon.